So, welcome everyone to AFFCNY's annual conference. Second year it's on Zoom. This is section 2. The workshop title, I'm not sure. Hang on. Well, we're just going to move along. Workshop, I'll find the title and let y'all know.
The real deal.
What was it?
The real deal.
The real deal. That's right. The real deal. Thank you, voice from beyond.
That's the Wizard of Oz.
In today's workshop, we're going to hear from Joe Toles, which I'm like beyond excited to be able to introduce him because I've known him for more years than I care to admit. And I was the beginning of his parenting journey, which is super exciting for me. So Joe Toles was born to a different race teens in 1959 on Long Island. Joe Toles was immediately placed in foster care. Despite challenges in the system, he was one of the first 10 African-American athletes to graduate from Auburn University and earn a bachelor's degree in psychology. Joe went on to earn his master's degree in sports psychology from Brooklyn College and continued his education to become a school counselor and a New York State licensed mental health counselor. For the past several years, Joe has been an adjunct professor with Alfred University and Long Island University. In 2005, Joe formed the Joe Toles Foundation, a mission foundation to provide leadership and social skills, development workshops, retreats, and camping experiences to children from all walks of life. You can find more information about Joe Toles Foundation, and I'll put the link in the chat. And as I said, Joe is a very good friend of mine and the parent to 7 boys adopted from foster care, which I'm sure he will share that part of his journey during this. So let's get started. Go ahead, Joe. Oh, so if everyone can please mute, please mute. And so we can hear Joe clearly, and then we'll have time. You can put your questions in the chat box, and we'll have time for question and answer at the end.
How do I see the chat box? All right.
Should be on the bottom, but I can help you moderate that if that's helpful, Joe.
Okay.
All right. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Joe.
Hi, everybody. As you were told, I'm Joe Toles, and I guess how I'd like to start this is to let people know. You all know that I grew up in foster care, and we will talk about that. But I want you also to know what I have done in terms of my professional journey. I started my professional journey actually working at Rikers Island, where I was a counselor and a teacher in the education program. That's my real first job. So there I was introduced to people and their places that I had not been familiar with, because I grew up on Long Island, fairly sheltered, and got to meet people in the city. From there, I went to Edwin Gould Services for Children, and I worked for a program. I worked for them twice, and I worked in a program called United Families of the South Bronx. It was a preventive service program, and where we worked with relocated homeless families. The second time around for United Families of the South Bronx, I worked with families that were placed in city-owned housing. And as a preventive service program, you know that they have to have a child under the age of 18 in the household and at risk. And most of this was about their housing, at risk of being removed and placed in foster care because of the issues that they had with their families. So I worked with that agency before I went. After that, I went to the main office with Edwin Gould Services for Children and became a director of a foster care and adoption unit. So not only did I grow up in foster care, I was now working in foster care or at the prevention of foster care. After that, I became the director of youth and community services for Planned Parenthood of New York City, where we had sexuality education for teens. We had groups for young women who were planning on keeping their children, so we were doing parenting skills. And I ran a great program called More American Graffiti and Control, which was a graffiti project where we supplied all of the supplies needed for a great art show for these kids. And these kids actually, these kids had been involved in the law because of their graffiti, but because of this program, we had a fantastic art show at the end of each cycle. And these kids were flown all over the world to do barns and gradings in New York City. It's been wonderful for them. After that, I worked for the Hedrick Martin Institute, and I ran a homeless and runaway youth program. Really, I was hired to work with and target kids who were sex workers down on the West Side Highway of New York City. But it blew up to such a big program that we were really working with all sorts of kids. We fed them every night. We had a clothing exchange. We had showers for them. And it became a really, actually too big program for Hedrick Martin Institute. Hedrick Martin Institute is a program, a program for, or an agency that really is geared toward providing services for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender youth. And that was also in the West Village. And then after that, I became a public school counselor for a zillion years, and I've retired. And I've been a coach of track and field and other sports since 1982. How I'd like this to happen is I'd really like this to be part of a conversation. I think this presentation works well. I'm going to share with you things about my life. And there are things about my life and my journey that should not be generalized. But what I'd like to be able to talk about is and provide a different perspective. I like to call this presentation a message of hope. And again, it works real well if we can communicate. So what I'm going to do is, we'll see how this works out, is I will be working off of a PowerPoint, and Danielle will be helping me. And you should be encouraged to ask questions, please. You can ask anything as long as you understand that I might not answer every question. But I really want you to get a sense of the issues that I dealt with while I was in foster care, the issues that I still deal with while I live in foster care, and then the issues that present themselves as a parent of 7 boys from the foster care system. Everybody understand that? Good? All right. I am going to try to share my screen. Okay. So part of this journey of mine has been rough. So I'm going to share things with you that we certainly don't have enough time to talk about my entire life in an hour. But we will be able to hopefully get a sense that of some of the issues that kids are living in, that kids are bringing to them. Let me just go on. We'll go to the first slide. So this is where I began. This is a slide of my grandfather and grandmother, the top 2, Richard and Ruth. Just hold on one second. Sincere. Sincere. You have to stop. You have to stop. It's disturbing me. So Richard was my grandfather and Ruth was my grandmother. And this is what happens when you have 7 kids. Richard died 10 years before I was born. This part of my family is Caucasian. They had 3 children, Barbara, Richard, and Dorothy. Barbara is my mother. She had 2 children before she got married, and then she had 4 children from that union, and the oldest of those children have passed away. Barbara does not want to have anything to do with me. I've never met her. And in fact, we've been forced together by fate, in that I was a counselor in the school of the district that she lived in, and my nieces and nephews were on my caseload. I'm telling you that because I want you to, you'll get a sense of all the things that have been sort of the things that I've been carrying through life, and hopefully you'll have questions about how you do that or what do you do in those cases. Richard is deceased and there's not an X to his name, so it's just Barbara and my Aunt Dorothy, who I do have some contact with, and I only have gotten contact with her in the past 5 years. Now, this is a genogram of my parents. Clarence, which is my father, he's passed away. I'm not sure what year he passed away, but he was only 16 years old when I was born. And Barbara, again, my mother, is still living. And well, in fact, I drove by her house to and from work every morning for the past 20 years without ever being able to stop and say hello or hi or anything. You could see this, there's these lines, these 2 lines in between the lines that lead to somebody, and those lines indicate a disconnection. So in this family genealogram, there's been disconnections completely around the board. So that double box is me, and then my sister, who was born a year after me, is that red circle. And this is the house that I grew up in. It's been very unassuming. I grew up in Nassau County, Long Island, and I got there after 2 foster care placements. So I was originally placed in 2 places from birth, and ended up there. And the way that I describe my foster care experience is heavy, restrictive, tense, controlled, unstable. There was mental abuse, and there was sexual abuse. The only way that you would know, if you were looking carefully about the stress or the weight of living in this home, was that I had this condition that I now know is called dermatophagy. Well, anyway, what I used to do is I used to chew the skin off of my toes and off of my fingers. And I used to gnaw at the inside of my mouth till it bled. And nobody paid attention enough, and nobody knew enough to do anything about it. But as I think about this in hindsight, it certainly was an indicator of a lot of stress, and certainly the things that I think, the words that I've chosen to describe my foster care experience, just that heaviness. And the only way that I could handle that at the time was just by literally chewing the skin inside my mouth and off my fingers and toes. Now, this is the genogram of the family that I grew up in. You see, there's a couple of disconnections. Edward was my foster father, and Alva was his wife. Edward had been married before to Elizabeth. They had no connection, and they had a child Alice on the bottom, who was much older than I was. So I never saw her or felt her as a sibling. Once my parents got divorced, we never saw Edward again. And these are the bottom row are the children that lived in that house. So we had Charlie, who was my older brother, and you can see he's been married 5 times. Jimmy, born in '53, died of HIV early on in the epidemic. Then you have me in the double box. Tony had kidney disease. He is also deceased. He has 5 children, and he probably, out of his entire life, probably worked about 10 years. Michael died of HIV as well. And Carl, my youngest brother, he is still alive, and he is HIV positive. So those results of this family, of the deaths and the dysfunction, really are an indication of the home that I grew up in. Now, I can't tell you where my caseworkers were because I was in foster care. Tony was in foster care, Michael was in foster care, Carlton was in foster care. We all lived in the same house. We all had individual caseworkers that would come to the house. The thing that I can tell you about my memories of a caseworker coming to visit is that the caseworker treated my mother in particular as the client and never really asked us questions about what was going on in the house. Now, we had a slew of family secrets that were going on. My parents, for instance, got divorced when I was in middle school. We weren't allowed to tell that to the worker. My father left. My mother attempted suicide, and we were not allowed to share any of this information because she was afraid that if this information got out, that we would be removed. Now, my parents weren't bad people. They were not great parents. They didn't have the skills, and if you knew more, and we don't have time to talk about that, their family histories really were being played out on all of us. So I grew up with an obsession of trying to figure out who I was and where I came from, because there was something about this family unit that I did not feel like I belonged to. I had different skills. We all looked different. We all had different last names. We weren't allowed to talk about being in foster care outside of the house. It was really, that I think about it now, it was really, really bizarre not to be able to explain to anybody why my last name was different from my brother's last names. In addition to this sort of core group of people, we had kids that were coming in and out. So they had other foster kids come in and then they left. There was never any explanation, though, of why they would appear and then disappear. So one of the things that they did, and this goes to the sort of the mental abuse that we were experiencing in the home, is that when we were not behaving in a way that they wanted us to behave, and they would ask us to pack all of our stuff up in a plastic bag and wait on the steps because the worker was going to come and get us. So I can't tell you how many times I packed all my stuff up in plastic bags and just sat there waiting for somebody to come. There was a fear that there was no consistency. There was no comfort in knowing that this was home. Although once I got there, I aged out of foster care in that household. So I'm not sure why they thought that was a good punishment, but it was abusive. I will give you another. There was a point of time I was in elementary school where my older brother, now I'm sorry I didn't tell you this, but Charlie and Jimmy were their biological children. So one of the brothers started sexually abusing me. And I didn't know what was happening to me. It bothers me today that I can't remember when it started. But I certainly remember the day that it ended. I went to my mother and I told her what was happening. And her reaction to that was so overwhelming, so, I guess, foreign to her, that she beat me. She beat me and she beat me and she beat me because she wanted me to unsay what I had said. And she didn't stop until that happened. I like to say that this was one of the most important moments in my development, because what I did in that process was I challenged everything that was going on. And I challenged it to a point where it was strength. I was able to stand up for myself, and I was able to sort of push back at all of the craziness that was going on. Granted, she wore me down, but it really is a moment of strength. And I tell you guys all this stuff because I want you to understand that kids that come in and out of care have this stuff that they carry with us. And we might get to be able to talk about that, how that event or those events have sort of shaped who I am today. The biggest issue in being in foster care for me was I was unseen. And not only was I unseen by the system, by the family unit, I didn't see myself. So I had nothing to tie worth to, no individual identity, no anything to give me a reason to be hopeful. I'm going to stop sharing this because I want to be able to answer questions and talk about what I've presented so far. So, does anybody have? Oh, there's a chat going on here. See, can we unmute? Oh, you did, right? Does anybody have any questions about or feelings about anything that I've shared?
I believe at this point anybody can unmute if they choose.
Nothing? Well, they're all muted now. No questions? Comments? Concerns?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
I guess, where did you, so I watched a video of you and your sons, like an introduction of you before today. And I have to say, like, I had no idea that this is what was going to be presented. I guess, how did you find your strength, I guess, is my question. Because to have I would assume the system failed you. I don't want to put words in your mouth and say your parents failed you, but where did you get your strength?
Right.
And then not even just to survive, but now to do what you do. I guess that's my question.
Yeah. What I want to make sure that everybody understands is that this is my story. This is how I interacted with this. This is how I dealt with it. So although some of these things might be issues that can be thought about and sort of used to help other kids, they're all individual. All of my other boys who have gone through similar issues are different, and their reaction is different as well. We're going to get to my strength, but I'll go ahead and tell you that I found a way to believe in things outside of the family unit. And most of those were people who took an interest, and I believed them over the issues that were sort of being fed to me in the family unit. The one thing that I think that if we look at the family that I grew up in, the history of what happened to all of my siblings, I think the one thing that's missing is they didn't find anything outside of the household to connect to. So people, I told you I worked in foster care. I certainly worked as an educator. It's absolutely pivotal that you look people and you see them. You look at them and you see them. I'm horrible with names. So every kid had a nickname, something about them that was unique and special. I made sure that I looked them in the eyes, and I do that that's what I do now, because I know how important it is to do that. But that's a good question, and this is kind of how I wanted to be able to talk about that. The other issue is when I do longer presentations of this. I did a presentation once with some neurosurgeons and went to their table, and they were all talking about this, and they concluded that I was wired that way. That there is something, I'll just call it resilience, that some people bring to the table that helps them. And their conclusion was it didn't matter what was going to happen to me, I would be able to overcome it. Which, as a person in foster care, as a person who loved the people that he grew up with, and later we'll get to my biological family, there is a lot of guilt that I still carry, sort of survivor's guilt. There's no hooray moment in this story. I don't think there's a hooray moment in foster care, right? Because these things happened, they don't disappear because you move on, right? I will always be that kid that grew up in foster care. I'll always be the kid who was sexually abused. And as a therapist, I work with kids and adults around some of these same issues. And I'm going to tell you, I know better. It bugs the hell out of me that I can't remember when it first started. Like, I want to remember that, and my mind is not letting me. So because of that, I wonder what else I don't remember. It's difficult. It doesn't paralyze me though, and it doesn't. Whereas my sister, who I'll talk about in a second, same issues in her foster care experience. It's destroyed her life, or the life that she might have dreamt for herself. Anybody else?
I just had a comment. I'm gonna try not to cry. So first of all, I think it's an amazing story and amazing accomplishments for you. And the fact that you reach out and help other people is amazing too. I have just a general comment about I had a son that I took him into foster care 2.5 years ago and adopted him last July. And people say to me, "Oh, he's so lucky to have you." And I say, no, I'm lucky to have him because that's what we say, because that's true. But hearing you, I feel like that he is lucky to have me because he'll never end up in a situation like that where he has no voice and he has the chance at a future now and things like that. So um I actually appreciate what you said and the fact that I guess we can be grateful that our kids found us.
It's two ways, right? So I always push back on people who say that they're lucky to found you. You know, I didn't go into this to save them, right? I went in this really for love. Um, and the love that they provide is sort of filling the empty spaces in me. You know, you don't have to grow up in foster care to have empty spaces, right?
Mhm.
So they help fill up the empty spaces in me, and make me better.
Mhm.
My foster care experience in our particular situation works out well because we are not different from each other.
Right.
You know, there's never a moment where they say, well, you don't know what I'm talking about. It's you're different. You know, you know what's different, and I think about this, which is totally insane. I'm 62 years old. I'm the only one in this house who hasn't been adopted. And I am bothered by that. Well, bothered, you know what I mean? It's in front of my head. Like I am the only one that's not adopted. And I don't want you to think, I want anything that we talk about, or when we talk about kids in care or kids with trauma, that there's some magic that you throw over them and it goes away. We learn to manage this stuff and we keep it with us, and we can either use it to help us. And there's some that need hand holding to be able to do that. And there are going to be those that are not going to be able to manage those feelings. And we all know someone in our lives who's tortured by past events. They can't seem to get past it. Anybody else?
I have a question for you. Maybe I missed the part. I just wanted to know, when you were having this kind of abuse or sexual abuse, was this, you said CPS was aware of it?
No, the state wasn't aware of it.
The state, yeah.
We grew up in a house of secrets. Also, I was born in 1959, so
Right.
people didn't talk about stuff, right? We were afraid. So they didn't know. We weren't allowed to talk about it. We didn't dare talk about it. Of course, now, you know, people ask you and people like, you know, give you an opportunity to be able to talk about those things. But just as an example, although it was heavy and it was constrictive, it was home. When my mother tried to kill herself, trying not to, because I just go back to being a kid. When she tried to kill herself, I was so afraid of not knowing, not having a home, to be in a place, no matter how bad it was. Like, I remember where I was standing and I was frozen in shock as her son walked her back and forth. And then they put her in they called an ambulance. And of course, the secret was then tell them that I ate something bad.
Yeah.
So, and I'm in elementary school, right? No, I probably was in middle school at this point. I went to school the next day and I interacted with my friends with nothing, with no release of that information. It just became another one of those secrets.
Wow.
But our kids are coming to us with their secrets, and sometimes they're not secrets. right? It's no different than knowing the information, right? It's how do you help them get past that information so that it becomes a although I know of all of my dents and bruises from what life has given me,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Okay. All right.
Right. So
Yep.
how do you help a child become comfortable with their history? And I again want to make sure that everybody understands that that's going to be different for each child. Each child is completely different.
Especially their age when they come into your life too, right? Jeff?
Well, some if you get little ones, you'll hear about my. I don't have little ones, but we'll talk about that. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and see where we are.
Okay.
Okay, so that is little me. The little kid with identity issues, the sexual abuse, the suicide attempts, the alcoholism, mental health issues. All of those issues were in this little kid. And all of my pictures sort of have this face. I think this is a good, and that it's blurry. I think it's even better. Like sort of the unseen sort of grimace on my face, which indicates to me what was going on. And that's the four of us as little ones. Now I'm smiling there, but these are the core children. You know, I will share with you that the person on the left, Tony, who married and had all those kids and died of kidney disease. I had left the house. I had gone to college, and I was having a conversation with his wife. He was still alive, and she told me that the same thing was happening to him. We lived in a little house and in Nassau County. I don't know what was going. I felt guilty that I had stopped it from me and did not have a clue that it was happening to him. And I don't know if it was happening to my other brothers as well. And that's me in high school. To answer a question that was asked before by Meg, the thing that happened to me was I found a person who helped me find something that was unique to me. So no matter what happened in the world, I could run fast. In fact, one of my coping mechanisms while I was in this family was we lived near woods. I would just go to be alone in the woods, and I would often be running. So that all turned into a talent. And this is me in high school, where I found something, track and field. I found someone, my high school coach, but more importantly, I found me. I found a purpose, something unique. When I talk about growing up in foster care and not knowing any connections to my biological family, I often describe it as falling in a hole and reaching out to try to catch the sides, but the sides are way too far away for me to be able to find a place. Track and field for me was that I found a place. I think it's very important that you help kids find something that is unique to them that nobody can take away. Sometimes that's music, sometimes that's sports, but everybody has something that's important to them, that gives them strength, and you need to continue to encourage that. It could be reading, buy books, right? If what you know, and I do have some kids. I'm still trying to figure out what their thing is, but um, but the best you can is to make sure that they feel something positive about themselves, um, and lean into it big time. My high school coach, I say, saved my life because he saw me. Track and field, even though I was introverted and shy and withdrawn, track and people saw me, and that the more that chipped away, the more they saw me, the more that sort of withdrawn citizen of the world chipped away from me. So good that in 1977, I set, at that point, it was a New York State indoor track and field record. It turns out that that's a national record. More building onto who I could be, like an identity. This is the lucky thing for me, is that they don't run this race anymore. So this record's always going to be mine. And although I'll tell you the truth, I have trophies and medals, and my kids have never seen them. I, I didn't embrace all of this success. I was in the papers almost every week. I ended up getting a full track scholarship to Auburn University. But I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it like everybody else did. When I looked at other people and their parents there, or how they celebrated after a win, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to understand it. And even today, I don't know how to celebrate to a point where I think it's equal to somebody else's celebration. I don't know if that makes sense to you. We really see that come with like Father's Day. Like, my kids didn't have fathers. My father left me. We never did. We don't celebrate in the way that, so celebrations feel empty. So I have this, and there's been times when I've leaned into being proud of all of this, but there's still an emptiness in it. So that's in high school, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, the person who was obsessed with knowing something about their family and wanting to know who I look like and who named me and all of those things, Shirley appears. Now, Shirley appeared because this one social worker, the youngest one, in high school, left. First of all, I was never left alone with the social worker ever until this social worker. And she said, and my mother was in the kitchen. And again, it was a small house, so it was right next door. She goes, "You know you have a sister, right?" And whatever my mother had in her hand fell on the floor. It was probably her worst nightmare. But I was given the choice and told for the first time, and I was 16 years old. You have a sister. Do you want to meet her? And I was like, of course I want to meet her. I was told that she had some issues before. She had tried to commit suicide several times. As I got to know her, found out she started appearing in the school. I would get called down from my classes. This was when I was a 16-year-old boy who was trying not to be seen in the way that I'm being seen. Like, can you send Joe Toles down to the office? His sister is here. And I'm like, I have no connection to her. In fact, her life was so chaotic that her foster family called me at one point wanting to know if she was with me, and I went looking for her. We lived in two separate towns, and she was at her coach's house. She had been sleeping with the high school coach. And her life has been pretty much all of that. I have followed her around. Many times she was in jail, and I would just show up. And we have a connection now. She has 2 boys, but I don't really have a strong connection with her, so I don't have a strong connection to them. But I'll never forget the day that I went to, I think she was in Manhattan House of Detention, and I went to visit her, and she didn't know, of course. And we got there and we started talking, and I was annoyed at this point. And I said, listen, I don't want to hear all of your complaining. Like, you know, you were sexually abused, blah, 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 blah. And I said, and I was too. And then she looked at me like a child and she said, but why are we different? I'll never forget that, because that's such an important piece when I deal with my kids or I deal with any kids, that we literally experienced the same traumas, but it didn't impact me the way that it did her. And I was silent. I didn't have an answer. It was a good learning lesson for me, but sort of an empty sadness because I wasn't able to give her an answer. And I knew at that point, and this is before I was, got my master's degree. This was before I became a therapist, but I realized I wasn't going to be able to help her because I didn't have an answer for it. So not only did I gain something, I also lost something. My best friend in high school was hit by a bus. And for whatever reason, my family never allowed us to go to funerals. And so I wasn't allowed to go to his funeral or his service, and stayed fairly close to his parents after that. But normal life functions need to be treated that way, just normal. People die. I shouldn't have had to been 16 to start dealing with the fact that people die. And for a person who was had an emotional deficit, to be able to deal with the bombardment of that loss at age 16 was unnecessary, unfair. I mean, I'm going to give you my feelings about that. But we need to be able to talk about our losses. We need to be able to talk about their losses. We need to be able to help people, children, ourselves process the things that life hands us. And I can't explain my parents. I can't explain why they did some of the things that they did. But I think I would have been healthier. And I think I'm pretty healthy, but I think I would have been healthy. I think my brothers would have been healthier if, in fact, we had dealt with life as it was. So I'm going to stop there and ask questions, if anybody has any questions or comments about.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, hi.
Hi. I just wanted to state, I totally agree with you on the whole section about where you say find something for your child. Yes, it's very difficult because they have to find themselves for you to help. There's a couple of people that are going to present this year that one ended up becoming a fairly famous singer because they felt that music guided them. Mm-hmm. One also had a track as a mentor. So track became their outlet. And another one wrote poems. And that was just a few people that I met, even just as presenters. So I highly agree with you. And I love the fact that you shared that, because I think that's a very big piece. Yeah. It's very hard. It's hard to find it for some, but for some, like you, maybe it came a little bit more natural. I don't know.
Well,
Did it come naturally to you, or
yeah,
did you have to find it?
I sort of fell into it, right? And then somebody gave me positive attention, right? So I did a lot of that to sort of please. I was one of those kids. I wanted everybody to like me, right? So I was doing it mostly to please my coach, but that's not everybody's experience, right? And for my kids, for instance, it's exhausting, but sometimes you just can't give up. You have to, they tell you what they want and then you do it. And then the next week they don't want to do that anymore. I mean, that's not unique to foster care, but I think it's incredibly important to pay attention to it when they say it. Hence the community theater thing I was talking about before we started this. The only reason I'm doing community theater is because I wanted to encourage my son, who said he was interested in doing acting, to read. So now it became my thing, and I don't know, I don't know how he feels about that, but it's usually important. I think we all can identify what we like and what makes us who we are, and everybody deserves the opportunity to be able to do that.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Sure.
When your sister asked you that very profound question, why are you different, despite the fact that it seemed like you had the same things happen to you, and where you don't really know the answer, how did that question help you parent your sons?
Oh,
Or did it?
No, well, anything that I tell you that I remember, and that is that was a learning moment in my life. First of all, I have 7, right? And it's soon to be 8. And I cannot deal with them the same way. They're all completely different. It would be wonderful if they were at least similar, but sometimes it doesn't seem. They have similar interests, like Universal Studios. They're all on the same page for that. But what they want to eat in Universal Studios is completely different, right? So that, and of course, education and lessons that I learned from people who gave me attention was uniqueness. That's why, because I can't remember names, everybody gets a nickname, something that we share and is unique to us. So and obviously a positive thing that they can enjoy, and it gets me out of the fact that I don't remember their name. So it does. It's that lesson sticks with me, that we need to see people, right? If you put us both together, gave us, listed all the things that were similar in terms of our experiences, it doesn't equal the same answer for anybody.
Right.
So, especially in therapy, you've got to start from the beginning with everybody. You can't ever get into that false sense of, oh, this is another one of those. It just doesn't work that way. Anyone else? Nope. All right. Let's see where we are at the screen with the. Oh, that's me in college. Look at all that hair.
We can't see the
We
screen.
can't see it, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I do? Hold on. Shoot. Give me a second. You can see it now, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Water.
All right. So I went to Auburn, and I was away from that chaos, right? First time in my life. I had to to learn things that I never even imagined that I would have to learn. First of all, I was from New York, and Auburn is in Alabama. So I had to deal with all of the stereotypes of people in the South think about people from the North. Also, my skin is, I have a tan now, but I'm light skinned. I was too light and too dark in the state of Alabama to really belong anyplace. I recall a time when I was at a party and there was a young African American woman there who was just looking very annoyed to be there. And I went up and I talked to her. This is in 1977, 78. And she says, she said, there's too many white people here. And of course, that doesn't really work for me because both my biological family and my foster family was mixed race. And then I said something to her, and she looked at me with a glare, and she said, "And you would have been a houseboy," as if I had done something wrong. And I didn't really understand it, but there were lots of good things, though, that happened in Auburn. I eventually became the captain of the team, NCAA All-American twice, All SEC 4 years. So I did well and was doing well at Auburn University. One of the most frustrating memories I have is that I was still in foster care. So the state of New York was responsible for me. They stopped foster care payments going to my foster parent because I was away at school. Now I had a full scholarship, so my tuition was paid for, my room and board were paid for, but I had no money for toiletries. I had no money for recreation. And I was put in a position where I had to come back to New York and request a meeting with the Commissioner of Social Services for Nassau County. And as a result, they started giving payments to the parents for the use of the kids that were in foster care that were away in college. But can you just imagine, first of all, I didn't fit in because everybody seemed to be rich. Everybody had the real racial lines were really clear. And then I had to go back and fight for decency. I didn't have money to buy toothpaste. And my foster mother she had been divorced. She had not worked up until that point. She didn't have money to give me. And so that was a big change. They talked about that for years. I was 18, 19 years old. Probably after my first year, it just wasn't sustainable. I had a full scholarship, room and board, tuition, but I wouldn't be able to go back to school because I couldn't afford haircuts, clothing. It was just ridiculous. So again, though, while I was there, this is just a few years after the first one, I befriended a walk-on the team. That's somebody who didn't get a scholarship. He was on the team with me, and we were going to the Southeast Conference Championships. And so he had made the relay team, and he was running. We were practicing, slow practice. We were practicing a handoff, and he came around the corner, and he was coming towards me to hand off the baton, and he dropped. He passed away right there on the track. So I have issues with people coming in and out of my life, people dying in particular, how I deal with death and dying is a big issue for me. And I'm just adding all the losses that don't go away, but I just want you to know I carry this through my life, and I'm going to try and speed it up because I think we've got some time. So I ended up at Auburn University. This is a slide I like using. Human beings are like tea bags. You don't know how strong you are until you are put in hot water. What I want to show you now, we're jumping. Okay, we finished me graduating. I graduated from Auburn University. And now we're going to jump to age 49. Now, to this point, I had been single. I am still single. And we can go into a whole day of why I'm single and what's going on with, and that directly tied to the experiences that I grew up with. But at 49, this happened, and hopefully you can hear this. 49 and single, I became a father for the very first time. My son was 18 and almost as tall as I was. I could see in his eyes that the world opened up in front of him. It was like he was free. He loved to play basketball and was pretty damn good. He found joy in music and introduced me to lyrics that, well, sometimes felt like they could melt my ears. He's still trying to relive his childhood and gets frustrated that he'll never get that time back. Today, he is 28, and he will always be my baby boy. Within 6 months, I became a father once more. This time, my new son was 16. He was a bit hesitant at first. The choice to join us wouldn't have been his first. He wasn't sure if he should trust, but with time, his laugh filled the room and his heart was unquestionably pure. He is one of the most caring individuals I know, but he protects his heart so that he won't be disappointed again. A year and a half later, my third son joined us. This son was 14 at the time. He was guarded and serious, but in time began to relax. He is dedicated to a fault and stubbornly independent. Although he is a faithful friend, he has difficulty resolving the differences between biological and non-biological family. He needs to learn more than the others that family is forever. 2 years later, and 3 months before his 21st birthday, my fourth son joined us. He had the innocence of a child and he sang like no one was listening. He was happy just to be happy, and that is a rare gift indeed. He laughs easily and has never stopped singing. He is protective of his feelings and people he loves, so if you cross him, be prepared for his wrath. Now, what had I done? In a course of 5 years, I found myself as the head of a family of 5 men who had plenty of expectations, but didn't even know what to do with family holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Frankly, we're still trying to figure out what the heck Father's Day is about. At this time, I was 55 years old, and most people often expressed how lucky they were to have found someone like me. Someone like me? I had never raised a child and found out quickly that everything I thought I knew didn't matter at all. I wasn't a perfect father. How could I be? I myself was raised in foster care and had a foster father who abandoned us right before I entered junior high school. I was the lucky one. They challenged my boundaries, they tested my patience, they created situations to develop my problem-solving skills to a point I would have never reached. They made me listen, think, and feel. They made me love instead of running the other way. They molded a beacon of patience out of someone who didn't need to answer to anyone. We became a family. 5 years after the addition of my youngest, I retired. My sons were all living independently, and some had started families on their own. I was dreaming of all the places I could live in the Caribbean and excited about traveling. So why did I have to pick up that ringing phone? Now I had done it. I was on to son number 5. He was the youngest yet at 13 years old and probably the most active and curious of all. He was like a puppy when I was around, knocking things out of place with a wild wagging tail. 3 years later, he is still like that and trying his best to incorporate the responsibilities and expectations of pre-adulthood. Less than a year, and son number 6 was here. He was also 13 at the time. I could tell he really wanted a father. He was the ball throwing, fish catching, and the TV watching together kind of kid that scared me the most. He wanted the ideal father more than the others. He is affectionate, funny, and full of youthful abandonment. He's old enough to understand this time won't last forever, but is hanging on to his childhood tightly because he doesn't want what we have to change. A year later, another son. At this point, I started to believe when people were telling me I wasn't going to stop. What the heck was wrong with me? This son was 19. He's kind, cooperative, and very willing to please. He soaks up his new adventures with us with such gratitude and appreciation. He doesn't like talking about his biological family, but is willing and happy to have joined our family, and we are happy to have him. We're not perfect. We have fought, cried, laughed, and yelled. There were doors slammed, names called, threats made, and yet we remain. Sometimes it's hard, really hard, but I don't remember what life was without them. They have captured my heart eternally. Adoption has changed our lives forever. It hasn't made it into a fairy tale, or surprisingly, our issues sometimes are not resolved in 30 minutes like a TV sitcom, but the good times and the bad times bring us closer. The issues that brought us together haven't disappeared just because we've gone on a few trips and spent time together. In fact, we will all have our issues that will follow us for our lifetimes. The biggest difference, the most important, is that we don't have to do it alone. We are now and forever a family. And just in case you think the story ends there, it doesn't. Son number 8 is on his way, and in a few weeks, we will welcome another 16-year-old into our family. For us, adoption works. Oops. And these are my first 4 kids. And then I completely really lost my mind. And these are my 3 other kids, and there'll be another one coming soon to a home near you. Let me stop the share. People ask me why I keep doing this, and I told them there's something really wrong with me. But this is what I do, and I do it well enough that it doesn't drive me crazy. And then I think I'm making an impact on other people's lives. Again, without perfection, without any grandiose beliefs that there's some magic, but together, it's magical. Questions, comments?
So I just want everyone to know we ran over a few minutes. You don't have to leave. Please ask questions. But in the chat, I included a link for the evaluation and all the conference happy stuff. So check that out. But please stay on and ask questions and be a part of this amazing conversation.
Yeah,
I just wanted everyone to know that that was in the chat.
We probably have 10 minutes, right, before this ends.
On time, because this room is not used again until tomorrow. So you guys
so ask away. Listen,
yes,
guys, you can ask me anything that you want to now. Since we have time, if you want to stay and ask, I'm more than happy to answer your questions or tell you that I'm not going to answer your questions. Because although I give you a lot of information and will give you lots of information about who I am, there's still a piece of me that I protect. And like, I think it's healthy for all of us to be able to do that. I happen to be wired in a way where I can do this, where it doesn't like devastate me, but it's not something I recommend for everybody. You have to be prepared to be able to do this. So I'm really almost an open book, if that makes any sense. So ask away. Because of my intense feelings of wanting to find out who I am and where I came from, I'm an advocate for doing that. it has sometimes been really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So my first one had a father who was in jail, and I took him to the jail to
Wow.
to visit. And you know, I don't know how to describe that feeling. I mean, he was older, so he was 18 when I adopted him, but I was like, and he hadn't seen his father, I don't think ever. Um, that feeling like it's just hard. It's like
Yeah.
I'm just giving giving him up. But his father had some issues, and I helped him process what those issues might be, how they might manifest themselves in the future. Um, and unfortunately, I was right. And now he doesn't have a connection with his family. He's got real mommy issues. He was one of 5 that went to foster care. I'm sorry, one of 5. He was the only one that went to foster care.
Uh-huh.
So the second one uh, really felt abandoned by his family. He was in a place, and they were talking about he had it rough. They were talking about adopting him, and it was always based on behavior. We'll adopt you. No, we're not going to adopt you now. We'll adopt you. We're not going to adopt you now. But he was a little kid, and his mom died, and his family tried. His siblings tried to take care of him. That failed miserably. And now he has connections to his biological family, but he's the odd man out. He's the last one they call, the last one they thinks of, and he's the most loving, caring person you could meet. He cares about that stuff. So when we get to talking about that, it bothers him a lot. The third one, I got in touch with his father. I had to, because his aunt was it was all this FaceTime stuff. You can't keep kids away from their biological families. He was doing well in school, but the minute that his father reappeared, he became different. He wasn't one of us anymore. He didn't. And so all of them are in touch with me. He's not really in touch with his brothers because they're pissed off that he just left. For this dream of his father also and still has his issues, so he's not really in touch with him either. And he's probably got some underlying issues that he needs some work with. But that one was hard because he left and never graduated high school.
No. Okay.
Yeah, and he was smart. He just didn't have to study. He was passed all the Regents exams, and what he has left is ridiculous. Like I don't know what it like, nothing. But has never found his way back. Now the oldest one has 2 children, and this one that I just spoke about has 2 children. One is his, and the other is his significant other's child. The next one has connections with his biological family, but it's he thinks it's stronger than it really is, but it is what it is. And his brother was also in foster care, so they have the closest connection. Who was next? And then there were 2. The one that I just talked about, and my next one. They were failed. One was a failed adoption, so he was adopted a second time. The second adoption for this younger one was his adoptive mother was getting too old, and she really got him when she adopted him when she was way too old. So in fact, he'll be on a plane tomorrow to New York, and he'll be visiting with her for a couple of weeks. But she couldn't raise a teenager, and so that's a good relationship. And then the youngest one has family connections to some siblings, and the siblings didn't do as well. Lots of trauma for all of these kids. Different types of trauma, and like trauma that I couldn't even imagine experiencing. Could never imagine experiencing.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else?
Hey, I actually had a couple of questions for you. Thank you for sharing with us and so openly, and it's as others have said, it's very powerful to hear your story. And I guess I wonder, from your perspective, do you feel if you were in the system today that the same things would happen to you? Do you feel it'd be very different for kids going? Do you think the same things will happen or are less likely?
Yeah, I see. Once you're in the system, I think the system has changed. I think that it's now kid focused more than it was when I was growing up in the system. There are opportunities to share and talk, and there are places where for people to be caught up and not like discarded. So I don't think, I don't want to think about me in that situation, but because I still had my daydreams as kids or as a kid, and if you ask me that question, I'm gonna go back to the daydream. Oh, what if, there was an actress on Here Come the Brides who I would tell everybody that was my mother, so, but I think that the system is set up differently. People understand therapy, people understand trauma, which is now the big thing. And people are trained and responsible for their part in taking care of a child anywhere. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, my older brother in high school did something. My father went up to the school and made him drop his pants and, paddled him in front of his class. Right? That stuff never happened. You can paddle in Alabama, by the way. I don't know that anybody ever does it, but it's legal to do that. But those sorts of traumatizing things are not. I hope to think that they're not. There's no capability for that. I am concerned about COVID and the absence of those connections to those services and those people. I think one of the things that we're seeing now statistically that kids' stress and anxiety and suicidal thoughts are way up. And I'm hoping that it doesn't get worse in terms of what practically happened. But I'm not hopeful that people were angry, people were sad, people were mad, and with no outlets. My saving grace was school. That I had a school to go to gave me a big chunk of my day away from the chaos that I was living in.
Antoinette.
Did you?
No, I'm sorry, Devin. Antoinette, I just want you to know I see your hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Devin.
Oh, I see it too. Okay. So does that answer that too?
Yes, and I was gonna, just for one other question at you, was just that,
sure.
Did you consider fostering in addition to adopting?
No. No. I went into it. I've been lucky too. I've been really, really freaking lucky, I think, because I do hear stories of adoptions that seem like nightmares, and it's just not enough. Foster care for me was not permanence. It wasn't home. Although it was long term, there was always the chance, right, that it could just be swept away. And that's not anything that I was trying to duplicate.
Thank you.
I think there are people that need to do that and can do that better than I can. I can't. I don't put a kid in my house and then all of a sudden they want to leave or you're going back. Because foster care really is about returning them to their family.
Parents, yeah.
I can't do that. And I know that, and I knew that going into the process. That Danielle even asked me questions about that. Like, no, can't do it. Sorry, it's not happening.
Yes.
Antoinette, you had a question?
Yes. I wanted to ask, given your background and the trauma that you experienced many times in foster care, we get children who come into our homes who've experienced some of those things prior to coming into our homes, either in other foster homes or in their birth families. And it's not always told to us and very difficult sometimes to disseminate that that there's some underlying trauma because any kid in foster care has some underlying trauma. But have you developed anything where, and maybe because of your experience, you can recognize some
Nope.
signs? No.
Nope. Well, I think you need to see the child that's before you, right? And I think you need to follow your gut instincts about what you might see. And if you have somebody like a caseworker, you need to process that out with them.
Mm-hmm.
But as much experience I had, worked in the system, grew up in the system, I was not easy in full disclosure hearings. I wanted to know everything. And yet they hid stuff. And it's nothing. I don't know if this is politically correct, but they intentionally hid stuff. That system is, especially when you're thinking about adopting a child, it's like, okay, that's one less case I have to get. Let's close this out and move on. And so you find some good workers, though, that try to give you as much information as they can. But of my 7 boys, and 8's going to be tough because I already know this information they've gotten, it's just not matching up with stuff. They've always snuck something significant, really significant in. So there's no magic. You just have to be very diligent. Hopefully you have a worker who's working with you that'll be able to understand the importance of that information. I collect information not only for myself, but for them, like family information, and only because I'll tell you right now, I've done Ancestry.com, I've taken DNA. One line of my family I can trace back to my 109th great-grandparents, which are Adam and Eve. So according to Ancestry and all the work that I've done, I've been able to go down the line to Adam and Eve. It's that important to me. I'll give you another example. I found out my second great-grandfather on my father's side was a slave in Virginia. They sold his wife and kids. And after the emancipation, he went looking for them. Now, there were no cars or trains or things that he could have access to. He found them. He walked, or however he got there. He found them in South Carolina, from Virginia to South Carolina. I can't tell you how much pride that gave me, because that's something that I would like to think that I would do. And his wife was already remarried, and his daughters were grown up and married. But he went and found them. That history, and I found a slave narrative from his daughter talking about this, was so very important to me that it just changed my life, finding out more about me. I don't know how we got there, but it's life-changing to know who you are.
I too have done Ancestry and a couple other ones. And I do think it's critical, and I do think it's critical to keep the children connected. And I understand through my own journey with Ancestry and, and doing genealogy, the importance of, keeping the kids connected, because even when you think you know your family, you don't know your family.
Right, but
so
you have a place, right? A place in history. You belong, right? That was what I belong someplace.
Exactly.
Like I belong here between this person and this person. And although my mother doesn't want to meet me, it was giving up that battle to get her attention that made that process healthier. I found out about her father.
Right. Oh, okay.
And I went to the gravesite. I mean, I do a lot because it's just so important. It's cool too, all the things that you find out.
Now, can I ask a question about that? Is that something that you would recommend that you do? Because I had one child where that happened with her when she was old enough to try to reach out to her mom. Her mom more or less rejected her. At first, she wanted to receive her, and then she said no, she wouldn't see her.
Yeah.
Do you? And I never thought about suggesting that she does genealogy to do research on her family, because I just put she's on my family tree, but
Right.
you know,
right.
there's no connection blood wise, but she's on my family tree.
Right. I think it's individual. So there are kids and siblings who don't want to know anything about that. They just want to forget that they were ever put in foster care, and they just want to move on. And for somebody who wants to find out more, I think it's a great way to do it. It's safe. I mean, I just saw a video yesterday of a 57-year-old man reunited with his father who gave him up for adoption when he was a baby. So sometimes there are happy endings. Mine was not, but I had to eliminate the person that was. My dream was to look my mother in her eye and tell her that I was okay. Because the report from the Department of Social Services was, she felt bad. She wanted to be responsible. In fact, she didn't release me until 3 years after I was in foster care. So I felt like she cared and she wanted, and oh boy, but she certainly didn't want to. And so my journey made me, I called my brother's wife, who was the mother of my caseload, and told her, and so the secret was out. My grandmother, I was in my 40s, found my grandmother in the phone book or whatever it was, and I wrote her, sent my resume, sent pictures. I was like proud of myself. I was working at the Empire State Building at the time, got on the express bus, which doesn't stop, by the way. And I see that she wrote me back, and I have this letter, and I opened the letter, and she said, "You guys should have been aborted." I call it the abortion letter. And as a grown man weeping on an express bus, because that's not what I expected. So if somebody is going to do this, I think it's helpful to help them process out what might happen and what might not happen, to help them separate the dreams from the reality.
Right. I agree. Thank you so much.